Tax colleagues in the room, partners that worked on this report, friends of the media. It's a very delightful day when we have come to release the first working paper on tax policy by NITI Aayog. Before I go further, let me mention what this tax policy consultative group is. It's been widely acknowledged that a very stable, certain, and predictable tax regime is critical for both investment and economic growth. Uncertainty is not good for investors. Uncertainty is not good for business. So it is that in mind that we brought in a tax expert into NITI as a fellow, and we have created a consultative group on tax policy. The details of that are in the report, which will be going up in a short while. It contains not only people from NITI, it contains our fellow, it has representatives from the tax department, and it has got experts from outside as members. What are they planning to do? The whole purpose is, the country is on the move. The country has a goal of becoming Viksit Bharat for 2047, which requires us to grow at a rapid pace, create enough jobs for our people, and all that requires investment and a very predictable business situation. Thanks to the guidance of the Prime Minister, you can see reforms actually picking up and happening in various parts of the economy. You saw the GST 2.0 rollout just 10 days ago, and the kind of happiness and delight with which it was greeted all around. It is a major simplification of reducing the number of GST rates to 2 from a large number of rates that were there earlier, 2 plus the sin tax or single use. Similarly, without just focusing on the rates, we also have the issue of the processes that are there in tax and the policies that are there. I do not think that most people are unlawful. Most people in the world like to be lawful and pay their taxes as they are due. The problems come when there is uncertainty or there is difference in interpretation. That means there is vagueness. Vagueness is the biggest enemy of the tax system. Tax law or a tax principle which is not defined precisely is subject to multiple interpretation. Multiple interpretations mean you think differently and the tax authority thinks differently, there is trouble. And the trouble leads to dispute, leads to litigation. Also, more importantly, more than disputes and litigation, it deters others from coming in. People will wonder what will happen to me if I get into that kind of situation. It is with this in mind that we put this tax policy consultative group in place, TGTP, and this is chaired by Dr. Puneha, and they are working on a large number of papers, and we will be coming out with 13 papers before December. We are all targeting the Finance Ministry's internal processes so that they can take them into account while preparing the next budget. You are aware that the Income Tax Act itself was simplified in the last budget. They presented a new act. It has been cleared by the Consultative Committee on Finance, and it should go back for the full passing. It's a remarkable change from the past. There is a 1/3 reduction in the total number of sections that is there, a huge amount of simplification. Because if you saw the earlier act of Income Tax Act, you would have a section and then a provided and then a proviso and then a proviso and then a proviso. You're in the 5th proviso, you've forgotten where you began. This seems to be the problem. I think that was required and I think that simplification was done. So you have a modern tax act which is simple. But there are other issues which have to be addressed, and that's what the consultative group is actually doing. And as Dr. Puneha has mentioned, it's come out through a consultative process. It's not a one-sided thing. It's a two-way thing. Discussion, formulation, discussion again, and then formulation. And that's how best tax jurisdiction in the world prepare laws. Having said that, let's come to today's report. And what are the areas they are working on? They are working on how do I improve FDI. To get FDI, today is one similar report. They are coming out with 2 other reports, one on financial sector, one on services sector. In about 2 months' time, those 2 reports will come out. They are also working on ease of doing business issue, which is decriminalization, dispute settlement. We will have that report in another 15 days. The one on decriminalization is actually ready, it's gone for printing. We are also looking at simplifying the tax processes and laws. One of the issues, for example, is TDS. There are so many different rates of TDS. 2%, 5%, 10%, 15%. Now, I am the person who has to deduct the TDS. I think that the rate at which I have to deduct is 10%. And I deduct it and I deposit it. You are the tax authority, you suddenly think that the rate is 15% and you think I have not deducted 15%. I actually am doing you a service. I am collecting tax collection on your behalf. and now you're penalizing me for not having collected. Am I to be blamed? So what happens is, what should be a friendly relationship becomes an adversarial relationship. So we'll be coming out with reports on TDS and how do you do appeals and how do you reopen cases. We are also looking at futuristic areas, making our tax system future ready. If you are in India of 2047, you need to have a tax system that is modern. A lot of the tax systems in India were designed when you had a paper and pen process. Today everything is electronic, your accounts are filed electronically with the registrar of companies and to the SEBI or whatever. Why do our tax systems not be actually aligned with these modern processes? So we're going to come out with reports on that, and also how do you use behavioral patterns to improve tax compliance? After all, when your child does well in an examination, you give them a chocolate, right? Now, the chocolate is actually after the examination, but it still influences the behavior because you'll get a chocolate before the examination. Similarly, this is behavioral insights. Can we improve tax performance? A lot of people who know that they can file a tax return easily, don't know that they can file it easily. If you do that, they think it's a complex process, you have to go through chartered accounting and all. So I think this is it. Coming to this report, this is the report, the details have been explained by Sanjeet and context has been explained by colleague Dr. Puneha. It is about improving the treatment of taxation of permanent establishment in India. When a foreign investor invests in India, he has a permanent establishment. The question of a PE is, how do you define a PE and how do you tax a PE? Question is, people want simplicity. You heard the 4 keywords which you heard. People want stability, they want predictability, they want uniformity, and they want certainty. You go to a hotel and you order some food, and you know that the item is, say, 300 rupees. And when the bill comes, it comes to be 400 rupees because he has added GST. You don't really like it. You should have liked to know it in advance that the bill will not be 300, 400, and then you would have faced an embarrassing situation where you run out of money. Whereas if you are told that 300 inclusive of GST or 400 inclusive of GST, you wouldn't have mattered. So I think that's the kind of concept that people are talking about. There are very powerful recommendations here to bring in certainty into treatment of permanent establishment. They're talking about having an agreement by which people can opt for what is it called, presumptive taxation in advance by announcing that we will opt for it. There will be rates which are predetermined. You pay the rate on your revenue, and then you are out of the picture. There is no detailed compliance, no great paperwork, no double entry bookkeeping, no kind of records to be submitted. It makes life simpler for both parties. It becomes a safe harbor, prevents litigation. And let me tell you, foreign investors actually love stability and this kind of certainty. Uncertainty is a disincentive. There are 2 things. Money in the world is fungible. Money which doesn't come to India can go to another country. We are all aware of that. There is a limited pool of capital in the world, everybody is competing for that. So giving a good tax policy gets you in. 2, FDI is essential. A growing country like India requires immense amounts of capital. Everything cannot come from domestic savings. There has to be an element of FDI coming in. We should be one of the largest recipients of FDI. And tax policy and uncertainty can be a deterrent. So this is a step forward. If adopted, it will actually help flows to come in very, very rapidly. Manufacturing processes are complex. Company, the way they move their products and funds around are complex. If you try to address them traditionally, it is very difficult for both sides. You end up with, two-two kind of a situation. Whereas you bring this kind of a certainty to a situation, they are very happy, pay your money and get out. So I think that's the kind of concept which has been promoted. There are a lot of other recommendations also, how do you do dispute resolution, people have to be trained, all that is there. But if implemented in good faith, true to what it is, these kind of provisions have helped a lot in other jurisdictions. They have given an example of sportsmen and artists. You pay 20% and you get out and 95% of them opt for it. Because who wants to buy, Steve Waugh playing in India or Chris Gayle doesn't want to pay huge tax return, right? He pays his stuff and gets out, That's all. It's that kind of a thing. There may be organizations which want to go through a normal tax route. Nobody is preventing that. In the long run, it will be a plus for revenue collection for government. It is not that this is a sacrifice of revenue. Because people may think, that's always our feeling, that we can maximize revenue if you probe. Actually, it will lead to delay. You will not maximize revenue. Certainty is good for both sides. And as again began in the beginning, the hypothesis is most people like to pay taxes. They only want to know what they need to pay in advance so that they can plan for it. The worst kind of a situation is I interpret a tax to the disadvantage of the taxpayer after the events are over. If you suddenly tell somebody that you should pay a GST of 30% or whatever number that is, after the products are sold, the monies have been collected, he can't even collect this anymore. Then he has to pay from his pocket. I think certainty is very, very important. This is the core purpose of this. There will be many more reports coming in, and this is a very technical kind of a report, but you will find it very interesting. It will be going up. I told Sanjeev to put up the presentation also, share it with all of you. You will find it useful. I doubt whether anybody will have any questions on this kind of subject. I would like you to go through it and talk about it. But anyway, the lady has already raised her hand. Keep it simple. By the way,